So the thing about greed, ignorance, and hatred, greed refers to grasping after and clinging and craving for pleasant experiences. Um, Hatred refers to rejection, condemnation, avoidance, pushing away, aversion to unpleasant experiences. And ignorance refers to not knowing experience, or not ignoring experience, or not realizing experience, being under the um, being delusional about experience. For example, thinking that we're going to last forever, or or even not even thinking that, but clinging to a self where there is no self, clinging to a fiction, for example, about me as a psychologist and me as a granddad, blah blah blah. I mean, I use those self concepts because they're important. I need to function in the world, but to the extent I cling to those concepts, when they change, I suffer. Like when I'm thinking about retiring in the next year or so. When I retire, I'll be no longer a clinical psychologist. Ah, so if I cling to my ideal as a clinical psychologist, I'm going to have suffering. And when we die, we cling to this self that we think, is solid and lasting. Was born back in 68 years ago or something like that. Blah blah blah. We cling to this idea, but in fact, if we can let go of the idea and we realize that it's just this present moment, everything else is a story. Then when we die, the body decays and dies and so on. But the mind doesn't have to, you don't have to suffer with that. You don't have to struggle with that. It's just like a tree growing and dying. It's just nature. And there's no me that's dying. Like when we see it clearly, this me that I'm talking about, that, was born in 1956 and blah, did this and did that, blah, 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 blah. This big story. It's just a fiction. It's just a fantasy. It's just a story. So when we die, nothing's dying. Really. The Buddha talks about awakening as the deathless. He talks about it as the deathless because nothing arises and therefore nothing dies. There's no suffering with death. So that, yes, we painful experiences are part of life, but we don't need to make painful experience into suffering. Painful experiences is just the way it is. I don't know if that makes it any clearer about. Yes, you're right. I mean, dukkha is part of life, but the arahant doesn't struggle with it. The awakened being doesn't struggle.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. Thanks, Mel.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody wake up? Julie, you did.
No. Yeah, thank you. I really got a lot out of that. And I love the lightness and the humor in it.
Oh,
It just
cool.
kind of helps dissolve some of that, got to get somewhere.
Yeah, there's nowhere to get.
Yeah, nowhere to
Nobody
get.
get anything. That's the
Yeah,
big
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I have a question that sort of stayed with me from at the beginning of the day when you introduced the second meditation that we did, and yeah, about staying. So you said about sort of not getting absorbed into the sense experience or the cognizing, and not to go back like into awareness, but to stay somewhere in the middle, to be really present and noticing. That's where I kind of took it. So I'm really curious about this going back into awareness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, look, it's a bit tricky, but some of you, how many of you? At least one of you was on a retreat that I did last couple of weeks ago. Bev was on the retreat I did a couple of weeks ago, and I've talked about it on this forum as well, on the day of meditations. I talked about an experience I had with practices, two practices. One was Sana Samadhi, which is the one we're talking about, and the other one was experiencing mind, which is the 9th step of mindfulness of breathing. And it's also, I think this kind of overlaps with another step to emptiness, which is called the step to emptiness, which is being aware, consciousness of consciousness, or awareness of awareness. So when I practice these practices, it's like I'm going back into a spot where I'm resting in awareness. So and it's quite profound, but it's still dualistic, if that makes sense. Like there's an awareness of something. There's a sense of being resting in awareness. Is like I'm resting in awareness, which is, you could say that it's quite bright and pure, but there's still a subtle dualism about it. So I was mixing that up with Sana Samadhi, and I asked Venerable Dharmadina at the beginning of my retreat last year, was Sana Samadhi a directed meditation or an undirected meditation? And I asked her that at the beginning of my retreat, and I didn't have a Zoom call with her until kind of maybe about 5 weeks into the retreat. And so I was practicing what I thought was Sana Samadhi. When I learned Sana Samadhi from, I actually learned it from a teacher that I had an encounter with way back when I was in 1979, actually. That's when I first had a glimpse of this particular practice. And but then it was rekindled with a retreat that I was doing with Analio on the steps to emptiness, steps of emptiness. And this was the final step. It was Sana Samadhi. And it blew my mind. It was just being present. It was exactly the same as these instructions I received earlier. And it is actually what the Buddha pointed to with the Bahya Sutta. So just with experience. So I was doing my retreat, and I had this question in mind, and I asked Dharmadina, and all the way through the retreat I was thinking, oh, it's actually a directed meditation, because I'm focusing my mind on the knowing. I'm being with the knowing. I'm aware of the awareness that's aware of all this stuff. I'm resting in that. Insights were coming, and I was resting in my awareness. And then when I asked her, when we got on the Zoom call, she said, well, what do you think, Malcolm? What do you think it is? And I said, it's a directed meditation, because I'm focusing on something, I'm doing something. And she shook her head. She said, no, it's not a directed meditation. It's an undirected meditation. You're not doing anything. You're kind of emphasizing just awareness. And she said, that's a very refined practice you're doing, which is awareness of awareness, or the 9th step, and it's experiencing mind in mindfulness of breathing steps, and it's, I don't know, one of the steps of like consciousness or consciousness, and the steps of emptiness. But it's not what we're talking about here. And I had also confused some teachings that I heard from Thailand. And there's a teaching that goes, Yoga Puru, that's what it is in Thai. Yoga Puru, which translates as stay with the one who knows. Okay, so staying with the one who knows. So I'm thinking, stay with the knowing, stay with the knowing. So I'm staying with the knowing, I'm resting in awareness. But then another way you could translate stay with the one who knows is stay with the Buddha's perspective. The Buddha is considered as the one who knows. Stay with the Puru, or the Buddha, our own Buddha, within our heart, stay with that Buddhist perspective. So the Bahya Sutta describes silent samadhi, where one doesn't step back into awareness, but one is just present. There's no dualism. It's non-dual, completely non-dual. And there's just the experience. And there's no self there experiencing it. There's nothing we're falling back into. I hope that explains that. See a hand coming up. Helen, go for it. And I'm recording all these things. I hope if people don't want me their voice recorded, let me know later.
No worries. Just on that, Mal, I think sometimes the way that, and I don't know if this is correct, so keen to get your thoughts. Sometimes the way that I've kind of thought about that difference is in some ways where when we're resting in awareness, we're kind of watching the stream, whereas when we're whatever the other one is, we're actually it's actually the stream is just flowing through. So there's no necessarily an observer there to actually watch the stream. It's just that the stream is there. We're part of the stream is flowing through whatever kind of information processing.
I would say that there's no stream.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. There's exactly. It's just that there's no differentiation, I think. So yeah, the quality of the experience is different because you're not even recognizing necessarily that the stream is there. It's just kind of, yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of, I think, how I was kind of differentiating it.
Yeah. No,
going from that
great.
position of being an observer watching the stream to then just being part of the stream, but not even having a recognition that there is a stream to be there. Yeah. Again, words don't quite capture it. But that's kind of how I was sort of trying.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. It's a radical perspective. It's a perception that there is nothing, that everything that we create is a creation, is a mental creation, and there's just this, and this, and this, and this, and it's kind of beyond concepts to describe because it doesn't fall within the realms of conceptual understanding. It can't be described. It's a radical perception. It's not even a perception. It's not a perception. It's outside the realm of mind and body. Yet it can be experienced. That's I think. Look, the thing about in Nibbana has three features that as far as I understand. One feature is desirelessness. In other words, no craving, no wanting, nothing, not even any movement. Emptiness, meaning there's nothing there. It's absent of thingness, including selfness, and it's signless, meaning there's no perception. It's kind of hard to describe because there's no. It's signless. It doesn't have a concept about it. So it's quite radical. It's a shift out of the normal realm of normal consciousness, yet it is a conscious experience. I don't know. I'm thinking about the way Analio has described it, and I wrote it down verbatim. I haven't got my notes here, but he was talking about how Nibbana is out of that realm of the body-mind processes of the functions of the mind, including consciousness. Well, the functions of the mind as well as consciousness, but it's outside that personal consciousness. One can be conscious of it, but it is not within the realm of one or a being, if that makes sense. So it's a kind of, I hope I'm not kind of turning, confusing people or turning them off, but we're just talking about probably the most, I think it's the most profound meditation there is. And I think it aligns with, and look, I'm not sure because I don't know the other meditation practices. I think it aligns with what happens with shikantaza in Zen Buddhism and what happens in silent illumination with Chan Buddhism. And perhaps, I'm not sure because I don't know, I'm not experienced in this, what happens in Dzogchen with Rigpa, and is it Rigpa? I think it's Rigpa. But look, I don't know, but I think that they're all kind of pointing to the same thing. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Mel, may I make a comment?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Really enjoy listening and gained a lot. I'm always amazed at the irony of how many words and how much conceptual thinking it takes, which is a great irony. So many descriptions to try and describe the indescribable. I love Leonard Jacobson uses the phrase of awakening, being awakening. What are we awakening from? The limited world of the mind, because we're so identified with our mind. And I love that. And he goes on to say, every moment that you are genuinely just present, that you're not in the past and you're not in the future, and there's no identity with self, you're just in the present, you are awakened.
That's great. Yeah.
And that aligns so nicely with what you said, glimpses of the sea of potential. I really took that phrase. So the sea of potential is like the one indivisible whole consciousness field out of which we all.
Yeah, look, I don't know about that. I mean, I hear it. I don't know. I mean, again, we're using a concept to describe something that's not.
We have no other way to talk about it.
Yeah. I think the sea of potentiality. That's a quantum physicist saying that.
Yeah.
Because there's something about quantum physics that what they're realizing is that there's like a space of potentiality, like everything arises from.
Yeah.
Everything goes into. So, that's on a kind of a, I don't know what plane you could say it is, a physical plane perhaps, I'm not sure. But it's like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the waves, that we're all the waves arising out of the ocean, that kind of analogy.
That's another one, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Again, analogies and, like I like Helen's analogy as well, like being in a stream and it's just going past, but you're not of the stream, you're not flowing with the stream, but you're not anything else, you're just there, present. That's it.
And I appreciate your term glimpses, because then we don't need to try too hard. We just stay present as best we can, and then we have glimpses along the way.
Yeah.
So thank you.
That's nice. Yeah.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you. Wonderful.
All right. Anybody else want to make any comments? That's great. I'm just reading one of the comments. I fell asleep at one stage, but felt more awake after I'm in contrast to when I was asleep. It's great. Well, that's what it is. I think it's like, I think it is experienced like, of course, this is the way it is. It's like a waking up. It's like, of course, it's always been like this. This is the way it is. So it's like waking from a dream. I think they talk about that in Mahayana Buddhism quite a bit. All right. Okay. So if there's no further comments or questions, I'm just going to stop the recording.